MyFantasySportsTalk.com.
Guess who's back? It's your guy from MyFantasySportsTalk.com, Brandon Reed, Dan Shaw, hosting another episode of My Fantasy Podcast. You didn't think we were going away, did you? I mean, that may be what you thought. We've been on a little bit of hiatus, summertime hit and things going on, pool parties, holidays and festivities, and a little bit of a break in sports action, to be honest with you. Nothing's going on except baseball, and while my man Dan Shaw is okay with that, it's kind of a slow period for me. World Cup's been keeping me going, but you probably have just been watching baseball and not even keeping up with this World Cup, though, Dan? So, man, good to see you, though. Good to be back with you on another podcast. We got a lot to cover today. Big news today.
Yeah, well, I think another reason why we maybe haven't had a podcast is we've been putting so much work into our fantasy football draft guide, which has now been released. So I think we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. But I'm watching baseball. I couldn't tell you anything about really the World Cup going on. Astros in first place, keep winning, 7-game win streak. So I've been soaking up baseball, fantasy baseball, which we're actually going to touch on. Our boy Nick Pertins dropped us a line, kind of calling us all out, it sounded like. But I'm confident. Champ's champ. We're going to have a champ on later in coming up in our next episode, Ryan Thomas of the Thomas Take. But we all know that Dan is the reigning champ of our fantasy league. So, how does that make you feel, Brandon? Good?
I can't really talk because I just got through playing Nick and Judy Pertins, and it didn't go so well. It just didn't go so well. They stuck it to me one day. 4th of July, actually. They scored like 230 points on the 4th of July, so that was hard to overcome. But we'll talk about that again. An upcoming episode of My Fantasy Podcast. We're going to have all that. So do not miss that. Look for that coming out in this next several days. But we're going to have Ryan Thomas on that podcast. He wants to talk about UFC and Brock Lesnar. Also wants to talk about the LaShawn McCoy story going on that surfaced over the last couple of days. And we did get called out by Nick and Judy Pertins over some fantasy baseball, so we'll take a look at those standings and see what's going on there. But that is in the next episode. We're already planning it out, so stay tuned. Another episode of My Fantasy Podcast coming up real soon. But today, just wanted to stop by real quick and talk to you guys about the new MFST, the inaugural episode, the very first edition ever of the MyFantasySportsTalk.com Fantasy Football Guide for 2018. And as soon as you said it, Dan, I realized, yes, that's really the key component to why we haven't been on the air lately with the podcast, because you have been grinding it out. Not only is this an 80-page fact-filled, just analyst filled guide for your fantasy football drafts coming up, or if you've already had one, sorry that you missed it, but you need to study this material. But not only that, you've been learning a new publishing software. So much going on. The Dan Chalk has been buried and busy.
I'm really proud of what we've put out there. I've authored, I guess you would say, a lot of the content in the guide, and we self-published it at My Fantasy Sports Talk. I built the site from the ground up 4 years ago. We hit our 4-year anniversary on the 4th of July at MFST. So I built that from scratch, and now we built this guide from scratch. It's not your typical guide. It's what I like about it is it's a PDF format, so you can just download it on any mobile device, computer, and you can have it saved on that. So during draft time you can look it up, or if you really want to, kill some trees, print it out. That doesn't bother me too much, but you have that ability as well. But like you said, 80 pages of fantasy football information. We got a lot of the MFST writers to cover teams. We covered all 32 teams, team previews, giving you specific players to look at and target, as well as the rookies that might make an impact on those teams as well. So there's a lot of information. besides covering all the teams, I put out rankings for every position and strength of schedule, which is something that I look at quite a bit, but I don't think it gets brought up enough. So we go strength of schedule per position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. So when you're drafting, what team, how their schedule kind of ranks against that position that you're drafting. So a lot of good material in there. I'm proud of it. It took a long time, it hours of work, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. And I'm finally giving my tips out to the masses, not to tout myself too much, but I am a member of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association, and at My Fantasy Sports Talk, we deliver a lot of great fantasy content year round. So this is a way to kind of get that jam-packed for your summer fantasy football drafts.
You're also reigning and defending fantasy football champion of the MyFantasySportsTalk.com Fantasy League. You've won one of the 2 years, so you got to be pretty proud of that, to win one of 2 years.
Championship game both years. But that makes us even more proud of the My Fantasy podcast duo that we have right here, because I won last year. I am the reigning champ. But Brandon, give yourself a little pat on the back. You did shock the world the first year, and you took home the title. So props to you there. We have 2 fantasy experts on the show.
I just wanted to win the first one. My name will ever be etched in the histories of MyFantasySportsTalk.com as the first ever champion. So now I just kind of took a step back. I felt bad. Dan created this whole thing from scratch, like he said. So I'm like, okay, I gotta let him get his too. So that's kind of, I just backed off a little bit last year, and let him have his glory. But all bets are off now. So if it's not you or myself, Orlando needs to step up to the plate, I guess, and do better. Just do better. So we got to keep this thing in house, though, right? We're going to try to anyway.
Yeah, Orlando's probably going to have to get booted if he doesn't make the postseason this year in the Fantasy Football League. It's just it's strength, something of the fittest. What's that saying?
Survival of the fittest.
Yeah, it's that, and Orlando does not have that. That's why he's not even on the show right now. So, Orlando, sorry, man. Booted if you don't make the postseason. That's one of the rule changes that are going into effect, a few. But yeah, you agree?
Well, while you're saying that, I'm kind of curious as to why you booted Susan Bianco, because she won the baseball league last year. So it's kind of that opposite effect. Like, you did a little too good. You're out of our league.
She disappeared. Nobody's heard from her. So, Susan, where are you?
Just basking in the glory. She took her winnings and hit the islands, so can't be mad there. But hey, guys, the fantasy football guide, so much information there. It's really all I need. You can take the analysis for what it's worth. You may have differing opinions, but it's really, like Dan said, a lot of different writers contributed to all the different teams. All 32 teams are represented here in the guide, so you can take away some information about every single team. A lot of good information. Like I said, it's really all I need. 80 pages. But the thing is, like Dan said, it's downloadable PDF format. It's very easy. Downloads in about 4 seconds, depending on your internet connection at home. For Ryan Thomas, it may take 17 seconds or so with his technical difficulties he usually has, but no more than 30 seconds tops. You're going to have this 80-page guide downloaded, and it's just $1. You cannot beat it. But if you don't really want to if you're not really looking to dish out your money to help support us at MyFantasySportsTalk.com, that's fine. We're not asking for that. Dan, where are these proceeds going?
Yeah, so at My Fantasy Sports Talk, we've kind of built a loyal following. We've done pretty well for ourselves. I'm proud of where we've gone in the 4 years. Getting those first few viewers every day and readers was something that I looked at and I loved. But watching that grow to literally thousands, when we've hit 75,000 readers and viewers per month at My Fantasy. So we wanted to give back with the hopes of this $1 draft guide. We wanted to put that money out there and give back to the community. So we're donating 100% of the proceeds to two great charities: the Wounded Warrior Project, which obviously helps support the veterans who have been wounded overseas or in battle or anything like that. And then the second, which kind of hits close to home for me, is the Susan G. Komen Foundation, which deals with breast cancer awareness and hoping one day that we'll be able to cure breast cancer and all cancers. But that one hits home to me personally because my mom, when I was young, I was 7 years old when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I went through that, and now I'm happy to say that, she's a survivor of almost 20 years. So both of these charities impact so many people each day. And, if we can take $1 of all the work that we put in for this draft guide to give back and give to these two causes, fills my heart. And towards the end of the book, I actually wrote a piece just thanking each and every one of our buyers of this guide from the bottom of my heart. How much it means to us here at MFST and how much it's going to mean to the actual people that reap the rewards and benefits of these charities. So it's definitely something I'm proud of.
So yet another thing we have in common, Dan, that I didn't even know until you just told me that. But not only are we very knowledgeable about sports, fantasy sports, very good at podcasting, very, very good looking, and very charming. But both of our moms actually had a bout of cancer. So my mom as well, over the past 5-6 years, has gone through it twice and has beat it both times. Hopefully, things are going to be fine. But just the continued awareness and just funding, to great causes like this. Is why you decided, and you're the one that decided on the where the proceeds go, the charitable donations. So, man, good job with that, man. So I'm just curious, do you even have a status to how many people have purchased the guide so far? Would you even be willing to say at this point?
Yeah, we have kept tally. Sales have been slow a little bit to start off. I think a lot of because we are still in July. It's probably not smart to do your draft now. I mean, Brandon harps on this constantly on the podcast, but we have sold. It's between 30 and 50 copies is where we're at right now. My goal for the book for the season is 1,000 copies. I want to be able to give $500 to each of those and kind of make it rewarding for them. But that's the goal for the site, for the guide. And I believe we can get there. Here's the thing, not to say, MFST is better than any other guide that you're get this easy. $1 I think is a good value for all this information. But I see some guys going, the printed out ones $8 to $13. But now I've seen some digital copies that are going for $27, $28. You can't beat it. You can't beat it, Brandon.
Oh, you froze up on me a little bit there, so I may be a little bit behind catching up with you, but no, you cannot beat it. And those numbers actually surprised me a little bit because it's only been just a few days since it's been published. And like you said, it's also the middle of July, or pretty close. We're sitting right about the middle of July, so still very early to be thinking about your fantasy drafts, hopefully, if you're doing things right. But so that's actually encouraging news. That kind of shows you just a piece of the loyal fan base that we have at myfantasysportstalk.com to get all of those purchases out already. 30 to 50 is really good numbers there. And so as of now, Dan, the plan is to push this out and publish it eventually on Amazon. But as of right now, myfantasysportstalk.com, that's where you would direct the traffic to go to the article on the website and purchase it right off the website.
Yep, you can get it right on the website. Go to our Facebook page. We have a strong following on Facebook. It's pinned to the top of the page. So just go there, click the link, and right in that article, you can buy the magazine. It downloads, like you said, within seconds, and then you have that 80 pages of information. And Brandon, I don't know if you caught the article that I wrote in there, but draft day tips. Don't go stealing my tips now for our draft. So that was something I was a little concerned with putting out there.
Too late now.
Yeah, that is true. But a lot of good information in there. A lot of just separate articles. You got sleepers, you got busts. I made crazy predictions. So my 50 things that maybe could possibly happen that I write every year on the website is always a big hit. So I did a little short 5 bold predictions in the piece. Lamar Jackson is one of them. Watch out for him. That's a little sneak peek.
Josh Gordon is also one that you've already got a little feedback on.
We've gotten a lot of feedback on the cover, which says our Josh Gordon on there, Flash Gordon, and why he is a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy. And we've received more mail on that specifically than anything else. So we've gotten killed for it. Well, I've gotten killed for it, but it's going to happen.
So we're also going to touch on that on the very next podcast. So stay tuned for that because we had to address it. So just skimming through the table of contents real quick, though, Dan, just kind of let everyone at home know exactly what you're getting in these 80 pages. But we start out with some QB rankings, running back rankings, wide receiver, tight end rankings. Then you talk about the strength of schedules. You have broke down the quarterback's strength of schedules, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, all their strength of schedules based on their schedule each and every week. Also, you brought out the rookie rankings, ranking the rookies, running back handcuffs, which is important. Breakout or bust, which I found that really interesting. Your bold predictions, draft day tips, as you just mentioned. You also threw in some defensive and kicker rankings, and don't forget about the defenses and kickers. All the NFL team previews, that took up a big chunk of the guide right there. You take a look at the bye weeks, sleepers. You have some late round draft targets, which is very key right there. Then you talk about the charities, of course, and you also have a very apropos section here of buyer beware, and it happens to be LaShawn McCoy, and this was written before the latest drama of LaShawn McCoy's saga. So there you go. So I don't know. You were like a Nostradamus there, Dan. Now I think that buyer beware, and you may need to add an edit to that and add to that.
That piece is looking good for me right now. I obviously didn't predict legal trouble for McCoy, but there's a lot of other factors why you just really shouldn't draft him. So stay away, read the piece, buy it, and you'll find out why.
And then you can meet the guys at MFST. I really recommend going to page, this is 74. God dog, that's a good looking dude on page 74 there. But anyway, it's all in the guide. You must buy the guide. Hey, $1, and I promise you won't regret it. There's so much fantasy information here. Literally, it's overwhelming, breaking down every single team. And I think all the writers did a really good job breaking down the teams, Dan. And we got nice, consistent coverage for each and every single team in the NFL.
Yeah, and we keep talking about our next show, but Ryan Thomas, he's a regular guest on the podcast. He writes the way he talks, and it's nonstop. So that's why the Bills are just – but my dad bought the guy, just a little quick story. My dad bought the guy, and he was like, Dan, I really liked it. There's a lot of great content in there. I'm going to beat you in fantasy this year. Why is there so many Bills articles? And he's a Bills fan. He's like, why was the Bills one so long? And Ryan Thomas is to thank for that. But he hits on a lot of great points. He touches on McCoy's handcuff and some other great stuff. But, yeah, every team is covered. One thing that he didn't say, which is actually true, who's just as long as the Bills, was the Titans, which is done by yours truly there, Brandon Reed, who brought out a lot of great breaking down every one of the skill position players that you're going to draft. And I thoroughly enjoyed reading all of the other writers' takes, and heck, I like reading mine as well.
It all came together beautifully. That's all I can tell you. It's all in the guide. So check out the website. Check out our Facebook page, the MyFantasySportsTalk.com 2018 Fantasy Football Guide. You will not regret it. Proceeds go to the Wounded Warrior Project and Susan G. Komen. So thanks for checking in with us, guys. Check out the next podcast, which will be coming out in the next few days, and we'll start breaking down some of this stuff with Ryan Thomas as well. So until then, for Dan Schalk, I'm Brandon Reed. See you next time, podcast peeps. Peace.